Hello and welcome to our weekly IG Live. I am excited today to be talking to author Crystel Patterson. And for those that don't know, she writes really wonderful children's books that help inspire them to follow their dreams. I saw she's on here now, so let's get her on here for you. If you haven't checked out her books, I really encourage you to. They're really beautiful and they're a great way to talk to kids about perseverance. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good to see you again. For those that don't know, I've had the opportunity to meet her in person. If you are local, because we are both in Sacramento, then be sure to follow her page because she does a lot of local events. So you can get to meet her in person, but also got to interview you over on Read Your World, MCBD. And it is so great to talk to you again.
Likewise.
Well, why don't we just, for those that aren't familiar with your books, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about them? Maybe you can tell them about the individual books.
Yeah. So hi everybody. I am Crystel Patterson. I am an author now. I have another day job, but I'm here to talk about me as an author. And I have a book series, a picture book series called Inspired to Be. And my whole goal with this book series is to spread Black inspiration. And yes, I say that proudly to all children. The reason why I say Black inspiration is because I really want these books to inspire kids by showing them positive stories and representation of Black people. All of the books are inspired by real people who are Black too, so then they can kind of make that real connection and be able to say, wow, if they did that, then so can I. But every book has a universal message so that every child can read these books, relate to the story, and then learn about these Black people also, right? So that they can be knowledgeable as well and be inspired by great Black people who are doing great things and thriving. So this is the 3 books in the series right now, more to come. The first book that I released in 2021, January 2021, is called One Flip, Two Flip, Three Flip, Four. And it is about a little girl named Ruby who discovers her love for gymnastics and starts dreaming really big. And with her staying committed and dedicated to her craft and honing it, and with the support of those around her, she accomplishes a lot of great things. And it's inspired by Gabby Douglas, the Olympic gold medalist. So this is a really fun book that little girls specifically really are drawn to. And most kids can relate because they like to flip and jump around the house and stuff. So it gets them really excited.
Yeah, my daughter really loved that one because that's just like her. She likes to jump all over and try to do flips and things like that. She loved it.
Yeah, every time I'm like somewhere and a parent is like flipping through the book and they start reading it, they look down to their child and they're like, that's like you do that. Like every child does that. This is the second book. I published this one in May of 2021. It's called I Am Different. And if you can see the book cover, it tries to kind of show 3 kids. They look perfectly normal, but they feel very different because they get conflicting messages from people. There are certain things about them that people point out, and some people uplift those things about them. Wow, your hair is so cool. You can do so many things with your hair. And there are some other people who are like, ew, why is your hair like that? And so, like in this world, as young kids, we've all been young, people always find something to pick on you about. And
Right.
so this is kind of an affirmation book for little children to read it and just really feel good about all these things that make them different. And as we get older, we do learn and appreciate that like differences is like our superpower. It's thing that makes us cool. But I think it's harder for younger kids to know and appreciate that because, people poke at stuff. And so that's what this book is about. And it's inspired by a young lady named Karish Rogers. And she was being teased for her dark skin complexion when she was younger. Thanks to the background and the uplifting family members that she had, like, for example, her grandma always used to tell her to flex in her complexion. And so that was something that stuck with her. And when kids made fun of her being dark skinned, she didn't let it get the best of her. And so what she decided to do was start her own clothing line to uplift others that might be going through the same thing. And at the age of 10, she was like featured on New York Fashion Week with her own fashion line. So I just think her story is really cool and is a really good inspiration to children, to show them like how you can turn a negative into a positive, and also that you're never too young to make a
Right.
difference.
Yeah, I love the stories that you've chosen to as the basis of your books. I mean, some of them, like if you're at all familiar with gymnastics, you'll know who Gabby is. But in this book, that was I actually hadn't heard. That was a name I wasn't familiar with at all. So it was really neat to know her story. Like you said, and did all of this. I think is something that other kids will really get inspired by.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this was my most recent book. This one was published in November of 2021. It's called Superheroes Here and There, and it's inspired by Chadwick Boseman. So this book is basically about a little boy who is like obsessed with superheroes, and he sees them in the way that we see them on TV, right? Like these supernatural beings that can do all these special things. And so he's so curious and wants to know because he keeps hearing that they're not real. Superheroes are make believe. And so he's like trying to get to the bottom of it. And so he asks his parents all these questions like, did you meet a superhero? Were they like this? Could they do that? And it's a book that juxtaposes these TV superheroes that kids see against real life heroes. And his parents are describing the types of heroes that they've met and the traits that they've had. And it's like a side-by-side juxtaposition. And he, in the end, learns that, wow, superheroes are real and they're all around me and I see them every day. And I can be a superhero too. So it's trying to normalize being a superhero. And it's basically the things that we do and how we treat each other that kind of really helps to change someone's day and really make that person feel special or valued. Those are the things that, like, you know, make you a superhero. My son, my 5-year-old son, really loves this book because now when we're like driving, he'll see someone like a crossing guard or someone and he'll say, Mommy, they're a superhero. You know, so I really like that idea of just normalizing heroes.
I love that. And like you said, being able to recognize those qualities in people around us is that's really amazing that he just absorbed that lesson so easily.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so like I said, this one is inspired by Chadwick Boseman. I wrote this story after he passed away because I was just so intrigued to learn that he was battling cancer, and he portrayed all these iconic people in movies while he was battling that. And so it made me curious about him. And so I started reading about him, and I learned about all these things that he did like off screen that I'm like, this guy was like a real hero, like walking around here doing these great things and just advocating for great causes. And it made me want to write a story that was inspired by him.
Wonderful. Well, can we take a step back? Because now the people understand a little bit about your books, and we see you now, and you've had a lot of success with your books. But I'm sure it wasn't easy getting here. Like you said, you also have a day job. And one of the things we talk a lot about on this IG Live is about following your dreams. So I'd love for you to share with us what I had this dream to write these books, the journey to get, because I mean, that must have been, I think for most of us, when we have an idea like that, that can be really scary or it can be really daunting. You think, oh, how is this going to happen? So what was that like for you to go from having the idea to actually being where you are now?
Yeah. Man, can I take a step even further back and tell you how the idea even came to be? Because that actually is what pushed me, is how the idea came to be. So in summer of 2020, there's a lot going on in this country, as we all can remember, on top of the pandemic. George Floyd was murdered, not the first Black man to be murdered by the police, but he was murdered. And for some reason, that incident kind of really started like certain conversations in a way that others hadn't. I know at work we were talking about it. It was always on the news. I think kids were hearing about it at school. And so my older son, who was 8 at the time, he, of course, was hearing about it. And he was asking a lot of questions, but there was one question in particular that he asked that really kind of set me on his path. He asked me, Mommy, why do police keep killing Black people? And it was a very hard question to stomach because it's like the way he formatted the question, I'm like, he's paying attention, and he's been paying attention, and he's seeing what's happening more than I thought he had been. And so that was something that had to sit with me for a little while. And later on, I think maybe a few nights later, I remember doing bed night routine with both of my sons. I have a younger son who was 3 at the time, and it was him who made me make this connection to books. This question that my son asked me, my older son asked me a few days prior, and now my younger son, I'm watching him and how he's interacting with this book that we're reading. And we were reading his favorite book, Good Night Construction Site. And at that point, I'm not even reading it. He's reciting it to me at 3 years old. He had the entire book memorized. And my mind just started wandering. Like, it's so crazy that like he knows this whole book and like he wants to read it every night. What about this book makes him want to read it every night? It's just about construction vehicles, you know? And so I started thinking like, man, what if like there were more books that were fun like this, that kids wanted to keep reading, that they could really enjoy. They were rhyming, they were memorable, but actually were about real people. Like a lot of our books that we see on our kids' shelf have animals in it or inanimate objects. Like, what if there were about real people, and what if they actually were used to like uplift and amplify these stories where Black people are thriving, so kids can see more of that. So even though they're hearing about the sadness that's happening in the world on the news and all that, they can still see the positive, right? And those stories are being amplified. And so like literally that was the moment, I swear to you that I had a vision of a book series that would tell these stories that were inspired by real people, and they were going to be fun, they were going to be memorable, and all of that. That was the vision. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. Mind you, before this vision came to me, never had I thought I was going to be a writer. I do technology consulting for my job. I never actually got any type of like satisfaction from writing. I never felt like, oh, I need to write or journal or do any of that. But like this vision hit me so clearly that I felt like I was called to do it. And so I literally, my next step was to tell my husband that this is what I was going to do, because I didn't want to like let the chaoticness of my life derail me. So I needed to tell someone because I wanted to be held accountable. And that was it. That set me on the path. And so it took for me to like, I already had the idea, like it was going to be a book series, because there's so many stories that need to be told. And like, this needs to be flooded. Like, kids need to see this all the time. So I told myself it was going to be a series. It was going to be inspired by real people. So I started making a list of like, who are people who have these awesome stories that like can be translated into a way that kids can actually like hear it and be inspired by it. So I started making a list of people. And literally, like the next day, I had a draft of the first book, and I was reading it to my husband. Like literally, now it was a lot shorter. You know, it took time for me to like keep iterating on it and making it a story. But it actually started as like a short poem. And
which was the first one?
That was the 1 flip, 2 flip, 3 flip, 4. It literally was like just the stanzas, and then I learned how to kind of like build it into an actual story and all that. So I just like literally made time every day to do research, figure out what goes into making a children's book, and, you know, start looking for an illustrator, and like just literally doing research. I was researching how to publish. Should I publish this by myself? Should I try to find someone to traditionally publish it? And like literally just making time each day and checking in with like, I got myself an actual accountability partner that I would check in with and give her updates and everything. And
how did you do that? Was this just like a friend that you had, or how did you guys work that out?
Yeah, so it's funny because I told my husband, because my husband doesn't like when I say that I'm going to do things and then I don't do it. So I told him first, because I'm like, I need someone to make me feel like crap if I don't actually do this. But then he's not like the type that's going to be like, you know, set dates and all that, like let's check in. So then I told my best friend about it, and she was like, oh, how can I help you? And so I was like, it would be nice to have someone to keep me accountable. And she's like, okay, great. She's like, when what are you aiming for? When do you want to have the first book out? And we started working backwards, and she's like, okay, well, I'll check in on this date. And literally on that date, she checked in, and I was like, oh, okay, we're going to actually be doing this. And so every time we would talk, we would set a new date. And it's so crazy because I'm the type of person that I don't like to let people down or feel like I'm letting people down. And even though this was my thing, like the fact that she was caring so much to check in on me and make sure I was doing it, it made me that much more accountable. So like I remember there was a day where I was supposed to be making a certain progress on the last book. And she was, it was the day she was supposed to check in on me, and she checked in on me and I hadn't done it because I had gotten distracted with something. We set another date, she checked in, I hadn't done it. And then we set another date. Oh, that third time, I was like, okay, I'm not calling her back until it's done. And I literally just ignored her call, went home, got it done, and then called her later that night and acted like I just missed her call. Because like it's really important when like someone is actually like making sure that you're doing what you said you would do. And so I just happen to have a really close friend that like doesn't mind bothering me and saying, hey, you said you were going to do this, give me an update. And
she can do that.
Right. And she didn't make me feel like bad about it. I felt bad because I'm like, if she's caring about this more than me, like I need to step my game up. Like if I say I'm going to do it, like life is always going to get in the way. But if you really want to do something, you got to make time for it. And it's easy for us to like let ourselves down. But I just know how I am. I don't like letting other people down. So it worked really well for me to have an accountability partner.
That's great. That's a great tip to have a partner. And then also I love how you guys set dates so that you say, okay, so you're doing something all the time. You're always doing a step towards it, because I think a lot of people get overwhelmed. They have the vision, but they're not really sure how to get from point A to point B. So that was great that you guys did that.
Yeah. So we did that for the first 3 books. And I'm like working on book 4 and 5, and I might have to call her and we might have to set something up because I keep putting things off.
Right. Well, can you tell us about how you, I mean, I know you said you kind of found time every day, but is that a struggle? I mean, that must be a struggle. If you have your job, how do you kind of switch gears from one to the other? Or, how much time would you say you spend on it every day?
Yeah, so when I was doing it, that initial push, when I wrote the first 3 books, that was actually a very hard time in my life, actually, because, I mean, it's a hard time in everyone's life. It was 2020, right? Like, and the project that I was working on was very demanding for my actual job, because it was working with CDPH for the vaccine management system in the middle of a pandemic. So I was literally working crazy long hours. So the times that I would actually be getting to work on the books would be the wee hours of the morning, honestly, like when the kids are asleep and my husband was asleep and I wrapped up the last call with my team in India. So at like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., that's when I would be like exchanging emails with the illustrator. So, giving her feedback on the stuff that she had sent me earlier that day. So, I mean, every day was different, but I made sure to spend time on it every day. And the crazy part about it is that like, that was the time where I felt the most at peace and the most fulfilled. Like, even though I was like doing all this other stuff during the day, the time that I could put into this was where I was like the most energized, tired as hell, but still very energized, So I think it's like this wasn't a forced thing. I felt called to it. It came to me. I really feel like this is my purpose. And so it's crazy. Like they do say, find something that you love doing and you'll never feel like you have to work a day in your life. Like that, I'm seeing the truth in that, because I'm like, when I'm doing this, I really don't feel like I'm working. It feels like what I need to be doing. And it actually like energizes me.
Right. That's so beautiful. And I love, one of the things I love about your story is that your inspiration, your dream is helping kids get inspired and follow their dreams.
Yes.
I'm sure that's part of it. Like you said, that you felt like this was your calling and your purpose, because what you're doing is really helping kids be inspired, follow their dreams. I mean, I think it's really incredible. And I'm sure once you started getting feedback from families and teachers, that must have been a real boost as well.
Yeah, that's the icing on the cake, because like I remember someone asking me like, oh, are you a teacher? Like trying to figure out what my credentials are to be writing books. And I'm like, no, I'm just a parent. But yes, like it is amazing to see that like when someone reads this book and it touches them in a certain way, or like a teacher or educator like can really feel like this is going to be a useful tool for their students, like it's like the best feedback ever, because it's like, wow, I set out to do this, didn't know what was going to happen, but it's actually doing what I wanted it to do. Like it's really inspiring kids, it's uplifting them, and it's more than that, it's actually being used as a tool by many teachers. Like the book I Am Different, whenever it's out on my table, like if I'm doing an event, like 9 out of 10 times a teacher will come to the table and they'll go straight for that book, like straight for that book. So it's just amazing to just see like the idea that started as like this, okay, I'm gonna write some books, actually turn into like I'm writing books and people actually are liking it and it's actually doing what I wanted it to do.
Right. It's actually making a difference. And
Yeah.
and for those who haven't read her books yet, I really encourage you to check them out. I've read them with my kids. They're really beautiful. I mean, they're just fun books to read. They're very engaging books to read, but then you read the story behind them. Can you give us, and I don't know, I don't want you to give too much away if you don't want to, but can you give us any kind of idea about books 4 and 5?
Yeah, of course. I talk a lot. I tell everybody my business. I'm like,
Okay, good. I was some people, nope, not telling anything. So
yeah. So 4, which is it with the illustrator right now. So hopefully we'll get it out before the year is over.
oh, nice.
It's actually inspired by. So I'm originally from Trinidad, and the country's type of music is called soca music, and I'm a huge soca fan. And one of the biggest, or the biggest soca artist in the world is called, his name is Machel Montano. And he actually just celebrated 40 years as a musician making that type of music. And he started when he was 7 years old. And so his first song was called Too Young to Soca. And basically, it was talking about all the rules back there. They were saying kids were too young to make that kind of music, and kids were too young to participate in the different soca competitions. And so to see him start off so young, do it, stick with it, and now 40 years later, like he is like the best to ever do it. It's just so amazing. So I thought about writing a story that is inspired by him, but also showed children other people who were too young to do something, technically, right? By what people, oh, don't do that yet, you're too young to do it, but actually have done great things at their very young age, and they defied that you're too young to do that. So it basically is, they say don't preach to kids, but it's kind of like a book that basically says you're not too young to do anything. And it kind of highlights these different people. It's like 10 different kids, different fields, who have done great things. It goes from ages 3 to 12, and it goes in order, and it kind of highlights what they've done. And a fun, again, story way. It's a rhyming book. It's repetitive. But then for every person, it gives like a little snippet of like real information of what they've accomplished.
I love that. I think kids really do get inspired by stories of other kids.
Yeah, like you can do anything you set your mind to. I think it can feel overwhelming if it's like, how do I do that by myself? I don't think any of these kids did anything by themselves. They had the support of their family members, their parents, their auntie, somebody in their family helped them do this. And so it's like, don't be discouraged and feel like you have to do it by yourself. Just make it known that you want to do something and seek out help, and somebody might be willing to help you. And I think hopefully that's what kids take away from it.
Right.
And then the other book 5, which as soon as the illustrator finishes this book, I use the same illustrator for the whole series. So as soon as she finishes this one, I'm going to send this one to her. And it's basically inspiring kids to be curious and to solve problems. And it's inspired by like all these Black inventors pretty much. And so basically, if you're doing something, it could be an everyday thing that you're doing. You might notice a problem and it might not work for you, but maybe you could find a way to make it easier for you. And that can help many other people, not just you. So it's about this little boy who really loves eating spaghetti and has a challenging time eating spaghetti. And so he goes through the whole process of like, man, I wish it was easier to eat spaghetti. And he goes through the process of like finding an easier way to eat spaghetti.
Oh, that is so cute. I love that.
Yeah.
And something I bet most kids can relate to.
Yes, exactly. I watch my little son struggling all the time because
Right.
he'll twirl it, and then as soon as he picks it up, it all falls down.
Yes. Yes. We were just going through that the other night, actually. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I was just looking at the time, so I want to wrap it up to be respectful of your time, but I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. Anybody that joined us late, don't worry, this is going to be up on Instagram in a few minutes, and then later on today, I'll have it up on our YouTube channel. Crystel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.